evidence somewhere to indicate why you're doing what you're doing. And sometimes it can be a quick phrase, sometimes it can be just marks on a graph, right, that indicate different things. I will say to earn higher levels of evidence, you do have to write more. One example I would say is that Chloe does a phenomenal job in general. I don't remember on this understanding check, but in general, I'm always blown away by how much Chloe writes. It shows me greater evidence of her understanding, right? But you don't have to write a ton to earn 5s or maybe 5.5s. You will have to write to earn those 6s, okay? Because to show greater level of evidence, or evidence of mastery, you have to do those things. So how to find function type from length, width, and height. So overall, it looks like the biggest thing is the backside of the understanding.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Does that sound right? What is the range of a function?
Make it to the
Yeah. Okay, so someone asked about relative minimum to get a 5. Remember, perfect score is a 6, but what do we mean by a relative minimum? I think that's the question that someone's asking. What do we mean by a relative minimum? So be careful with that, because some people said that, but here's the thing. That is a relative minimum. Is that the lowest value for the entire function?
No, it's just in that section.
Remember, when we say relative minimum, it is the lowest for that section of the graph, because this is very clearly a lower y value, right? So to earn higher there, you need to recognize that it's the lowest section for the graph. An even better way to recognize it is that the function stops what?
Stop decreasing.
And starts to increase. The relative minimum will always occur when that function stops decreasing and starts to increase. That's a really, really, really important detail there. There's one more thing I'm going to add in a second that would make it go from a 5.5 to a 6. Yes, ma'am?
Oh, I was just gonna ask you what it
Yeah. Did you have all those details in there?
was.
Okay. So, though it has all those details, make it go up to a 6. Here's what you have to remember about a relative minimum, is the notation of how we write about it. This will actually come up with number 10. But if I ever ask you for the relative minimum, you need to indicate that it's a relative minimum of whatever the y value is at x equals whatever the x value is. That's the final detail to get to a 6. Whenever you talk about a relative minimum, the minimum is the output. Same with the maximum, right? So it's a relative minimum of whatever that y value is at whatever that x value is. Get it over there, Caleb?
Yeah.
You know that just like squirted all over my floor, right? Okay. By the way, I know that we're going to play around and be like, Miss Kenny, just take it easy on us. But I need you to understand, I care about your future too much. Prom is one day for the rest of your... This education is for the rest of your life, okay?
Go hard the rest of the year.
Okay, I would recommend taking notes and detailing about these things. I'm doing this because I care about you. All right, I think a lot of us were pretty good on number 5. I would have made an extra column for h of x and identified those zeros in there, but it was C. Really quickly, no one asked about 6, but we should have. There was a lot of us who missed a really important detail in number 6. Some of us got this one right though, and you need to take notes on this if you missed some value ideas here. At which height does the planter box have a volume of 50 cubic inches? What's the easiest way to get started on that? Okay, so I want to pause for a second. You said find the zeros, right? But here's a 0, right? Meaning that the volume is what there? Do I want a volume of 0? Okay, I don't want a volume of 0, I want a volume of 50. So I wouldn't put a line there, I would put the line at a volume of 50. That's a volume of 50 right there. How am I going to identify what heights give me a volume of 50 at that point, or at this level? Right. Now what's a more mathematical term than just crossing that line? Intersecting that line, right? One thing I do want to point out, just because this will explain things, This is why I don't just say cross that line, because let's say I have this line, cross, cross, but you see how it can just touch and then go back away? That's still intersecting the line. It doesn't have to cross through it, it just has to touch it. Does that distinction make sense? Yeah. That's why I say intersect instead of just cross. It's more mathematically accurate. So, tell me when to stop because the function intersects that line. Okay?
Stop.
Do I need to keep going? Yeah?
Oh, wow.
Okay. But I'm actually going to pause here. Not all three of those work. All three of those points have a volume of 50. Does anyone know which one of those will not actually work in the context of this problem? The last one. Because remember, what kind of volume can you not have? So everything that is after here, that's all negative. Even though it goes back to being positive, it's after this negative, meaning I cannot cut that much. Remember, we started with a rectangle. I cannot cut beyond this. So that does not work in the domain. By the way, does anyone know what the domain for this function would be? So I can't do that purple part. So what's the lowest x value that we can use? Well, the maximum is 6, actually, right? So the max would be 6, the lowest would be 0. Right? We cannot have anything negative for our cuts or for our volume as well, so none of that would work. So I'd only have that 0 to 6. Notice this 0.25 would be roughly here. This 5.36 would be roughly there. And those are the only 2 points that are in the domain. Took some good notes on that one to learn from your mistakes.
I'm trying to focus that. Let me get my mind.
Keep your mindset.
Yeah, let me set my mind. Really like-
Questions, comments, concerns, things you want to push on? You good with that one now? Don't you do it, Caleb. You know, I'm gonna start making you do some push-ups, jumping jacks, something. I'm pretty sure someone asked about how to identify multiplicities. So remember, you first need to identify the 0, right? Not going to go through the work, but for x minus 1, what is that 0?
Oh, let me turn on.
So for this x minus 1, what's the 0?
One.
X equals 1. For x plus 3, the 0 is...
Negative 3.
Each of those factors shows up how many times?
1.
So each of these zeros has a multiplicity of
1.
1. Okay? When I look at D, x minus 2, that would have a 0 of x equals 2. But how many times does x minus 2 show up?
3 times.
Notice I could even write it out, x equals 2 3 times for my zeros, but that's still the same number, so x equals 2 with what multiplicity?
3.
Right. How many times that factor shows up, or how many times that 0 shows up in the factors, that's the multiplicity. So which of these has a function, or has a 0 with a multiplicity of 2?
C.
C. And which 0 has a multiplicity of 2?
5.
5. Well, how would we write that? Not just 5, x equals 5, right? So x minus 5 times x plus 1 times x minus 5. That shows up twice, so x equals 5 has a multiplicity of 2. Okay? And then the level of detail that you go into is what determines how high you score. Show me your level of mastery. What are your questions at this point? Thanks, Chloe. I appreciate someone engaging. Alright. Number 8, someone did ask about this. 2 things I want to point out. I don't think it was as bad in this class as it was in the other class, but one of the things I would do, and a lot of us did this very successfully, is draw vertical lines to show where this graph can split. Kiani, you with us? Uh-huh. Okay. where are the vertical lines that I should draw?
At the zero.
At the zeros. So here,
Yes.
right? There's an x-intercept. Here, at 6.
6.9.
You mean 9 comma 0? Or 6 and 9, okay? Now, I had some students also include one here. What were they looking at? That point of intersection. Do not look at that point of intersection, it's all about the zeros, okay? So, from here, remember it's asking for just which interval is v of x positive. Well, what is it here? And this is, so, earlier, Jakeem, you were asking, I think it was Jakeem that was asking about writing or levels of evidence, was that you? Okay. Well, first off, what is this section? Would this be positive or negative? This would be negative. Now, that's a claim, right? What's your evidence for that claim? Well, the simple thing, without a lot of writing, would be that these values are positive, these values are positive, and remember we're multiplying them, right? Okay? And these values are, and we're multiplying those. And a positive times a negative is negative. Right? That's something you could do. Now, that may not be something you thought of off the top of your head. That's just an idea that you make the note of, hey, positive times negative is negative. And that's just the way I thought about writing it. Does that make sense?
So what do you add on multiply side?
Say it one more time.
What do you say when you multiply it, like between the different lines?
Well, so remember, we're trying to determine if the product, the v of x, will be positive or negative. Look at this line. All of these values, the y values, are they positive or negative? They're above the x-axis. They're positive, right? All of these y values are positive. All of these y values are, notice how they're below the x-axis? So they're negative. So positive times a negative is negative. Whereas if I look over here, all these y values are positive. These are positive. And these are positive. And if I multiply a positive times a positive, I get a positive. Does that make sense? Like that's all I'm looking at. Can you let... Hey. Oh, do I?
Yes, sir. You have a meeting.
Cool. I will head down there. Hey, Miss Courtney will lead. Okay. Alright. So, hey, listen. So the final answers, right? When you check them out, so the interval between 0 and 6, the interval between 0 and 6 is positive. And 9 to infinity is positive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Number 9, quickly before I go. So what type of function will v of x be? Why do we know it's cubic? We've got 3 linear factors being multiplied. So it is cubic. It also has how many zeros? 3 zeros, right? So we want to pay attention to those things. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a pause right here. I will come back and talk about 10 through 12, or I should be back to talk about 10 through 12.
About 10:50.
No, not about 10:50. While I am gone, right, I've already passed this out. Actually, Miss Courtney passed this out. I didn't pass out anything. I don't want to lie to y'all. This is skills practice, right? 2 sheets that I think will be instrumental and very effective in helping you prepare for your test. And so, you have a lot going on here. This covers not pretty much, this covers everything that could be on the test because it covers everything from lessons 2, 3, and 4. I do not care what you work on. There's a lot there. So what do I care about as you work?
Your understanding.
I do care about your understanding, your learning, and growing.
Collaboration.
What did you say? I do want evidence, but actually, Chloe, active collaboration. I don't care where you work, but everybody in the group should be where?
Collaborate.
Actively collaborating, which means you need to be on the same problems. Okay? Help each other grow, help each other check each other. Now, if you finish a problem early, can you move on to something else and practice there? Sure, 100%. But when the group finishes, when everyone in the group's done, you should come back together and discuss. If someone asks a question, you should pause what you're working on and help each other grow and improve. All right, I'm gonna go to this meeting. Please actively work. Ms. Courtney will be checking on your active collaboration throughout this time, and it will matter heavily for what we do next week. Yes,
Bring that donut back.
I don't think it's that kind of meeting. If there's donuts there, I'll bring you one back.
Imagine you come in with donuts.
Say again?
I know you want to say some office.
All right, yeah, you can pause it, Ms. Courtney.